form I'd like to talk about in this video is the agency disclosure statement. This is a state of Ohio mandated form that is to be completed at the time that you write the offer. The form is generated by the buyer's agent at the time of writing the offer, not by the listing agent. It is then presented to the listing agent and their client, and they sign it. So this form is separate from the consumer guide, which is really kind of a precursor to this form, but this is a form that you would write at the time of the offer. It's very straightforward. At the very top, it lists the property address, and it lists who the buyer and the seller is. You know who your buyer is, and many times I see people not fill out the seller section. You should fill out the seller section. Where would you find that? You would find that either on the property disclosures. You could go to the county's auditor's website and find the names of the owners, but you could certainly find it, and you should take the time to find it and add it to the form and complete the top section with the buyer and the seller. So let's talk about the different types of setups here on the form, because you have basically a number of them. Number one is a transaction involving two agents from two different brokerages. So the top line talks about the buyer will be represented by, that is you. In this case, for myself, it would be the buyers represented by Michael Teese with Keller Williams, Greater Cleveland West. And then the second line would be the seller will be represented by the listing agent. That could be John Doe from Howard Hanna, for instance. So that's pretty clear-cut how to fill that out. And then your clients would sign it at the bottom. You're not involved in signing this form. You would present that to the listing agent along with your offer. Let me make a very important point here about a transaction involving two agents from two different brokerages. Keller Williams Greater Cleveland West is its own brokerage and is separate from the other Keller Williams offices in town. So if you are writing an offer with a Keller Williams agent from Keller Williams Tri-County, Keller Williams Chevetti, Keller Williams Greater Cleveland, on and on and on, they are a different broker, and you would be filling out section number one. Section number two is a transaction involving two agents in the same brokerage. This is a case where the agent works out of Keller Williams Greater Cleveland West. They're in our same brokerage, work out of the same building, and an example would be if two agents in the real estate brokerage, Keller Williams Greater Cleveland West, you check that the first box is where it lists the two agents. That's the box you're going to check. And it is going to state that Michael Teese works for the buyer and Brian Salem works for the seller, for instance. But whoever the agent is out of his office, that's who is going to be working for the seller. You're going to be working for the buyer. And that is the only section that you would fill out in section number two. The second box, where it talks about every agent in the brokerage represents a client, therefore the agents in the broker will be working for both the buyer and the seller. That's really kind of what they call dual agency. We do not practice dual agency, okay? So you will never check that second box in transaction involving two agents in the same brokerage. Once again, our broker does not practice dual agency. Then if we get down to the last one, number three, transaction involving only one agent, that would be a situation where you would list opposite yourself. Michael Teese and the real estate brokerage, Keller Williams, Greater Cleveland West. The first box, be dual agents. Same as the box up at number two that I told you not to check. You will never check this box. You will never be a dual agent. So you'll go down to the next box and you'll check that, where you're representing either the seller or the buyer in this transaction as a client. So let's give a couple examples. You're the listing agent. Someone comes to an open house, they like it, they want to write an offer, they don't have an agent, they want to write it with you. You're representing the seller. When you're a listing agent, you're always representing the seller. And therefore you would check that you're representing the seller, and you would let that person know that. So that's one of the classic examples where there's only one agent involved and you're representing the seller. Let's talk about another one. Let's say, for instance, that you go to a for sale by owner, and the guy's trying to sell and he's willing to work with you and pay you a commission. And so you bring in your client and you look at it and they say they want to write on it. This would be a situation where you would check that box that you're representing only And in that case, you know, you're not the listing agent. The for sale by owner is on his own, representing himself, and this is a case where you would check that you're representing the buyer. And you would let him know that you're representing the buyer, and he's unrepresented, and he's representing himself. Those are the two typical scenarios under that, that section of only one agent involved in the transaction. And so you're either representing the seller or the buyer, you're never representing both. And that, I think, pretty much covers that. In both numbers 1, 2, and 3, after it's completed properly in the proper section, you have your client sign as the buyer. And then this is part of the packet that goes to the listing agent, when you're presenting the offer. On our form, there's a page 2 of the agency disclosure, and we have initial boxes at the bottom of page 2 that your client needs to sign, so don't miss those either. I think that covers the disclosure, the agency disclosure form.